Welcome to Heart Power with Saskia, the heart-based podcast exploring what it means to be intuitive, follow one's heart, and be truly empowered from the inside out. So I'd like to welcome today, I'm joined by Lauren Mantecón, have I pronounced that correctly? An artist and a mentor. She has a very spiritual and metaphysical influences with her work, and I'm really excited to delve into that with you, Lauren. Welcome.
Thank you for having me on, Saskia. Really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
Here I am.
Thanks for coming
I'm in
on.
Sante Fe, and you're over there across the pond in Australia.
Yeah, in Melbourne, that's right. What's the weather like in Sante Fe at the moment?
It's starting to get warm. Sante Fe is a high elevation. We're 7,000 feet up. So people think, some people think it's just desert, which it is. It's the high desert. And so we've got the mountains, and you can ski just half an hour up the mountain, and not a lot of lakes, but enough water.
Yeah, cool. So have you lived in Santa Fe? You've been there for a long time?
I've been here a decade. I'm a bit of a gypsy. I grew up traversing our East Coast and West Coast. So from California to New England, which is Massachusetts and Boston and New Hampshire, those states. So the two different coasts on, and it was quite the journey. You know, my father worked for a company where we got moved every 3 years. So at the time it was quite traumatic. Especially when you get into those middle school years and high school years. So my sense of identity was in the realm of geography. Where are you from? You know, we're different on the East Coast and the West Coast. It would be kind of like moving from country to country. Some people really take to it, but for me, I felt I have this need to nest and belong and be settled. But the gypsy soul in me didn't know it at the time. So I've always felt a little like a, just sort of a push and pull, you know, like which way am I going? And then my father, I'm a first generation Mexican-American. My father grew up in Mexico City. And my mom is a New Englander, and my dad went to college in the States. And so I've always had a love of Mexico as well, and spent quite a bit of time there in my early 20s. Thought maybe I might even move there, but it didn't quite work out that way. But as an adult, my family's in Southern California. I moved to Portland, Oregon, which is on the Pacific coast as well, up from California.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things
about 20
Oregon.
years. Yeah. And then I just felt the calling, and I had applied. My life really needed a change. And I was going through a lot of heavy personal things, breakup of long-term relationship, just needing a change in life. And so I had applied to 2 art residencies at the Santa Fe Art Institute and another one in Taos, New Mexico, which is a small mountain town not too far from here. And I did both of them. And by that point, I had felt, even before I got here, that Santa Fe had been calling me. You know, it's funny. A place can call you.
I get that.
It wasn't like I in my mind, in my intellect, I really said, I've got to go, research. I got to go to Santa Fe. It was almost like a whisper. And Santa Fe, or New Mexico in general, is quite magical and mystical. That some people say the whole region is on like crystal mounds. And if you go hiking, you find milk and you find little crystals everywhere.
Oh, amazing.
And it's almost like it's feminine. It's a feminine place. We have this thing in Colorado, the Rocky Mountains. You might have heard of them.
Yes.
And we are the very end of the Rocky Mountains.
Oh, yeah, because you're at the bottom, aren't you?
Literally,
It's like,
tapers off like this into like just one rock formation.
So it's kind of like a power place then, because all that energy from the mountains and all of the gemstones and things have all sort of go there.
I do feel it as a power place, and it's feminine in the sense that if you really listen, she whispers to you.
Oh,
like
I'm getting tingles.
Whisper. Yeah.
Beautiful. So you've been there for quite some time now?
Almost a decade now. And I feel the energy here. I feel protected. I feel nurtured. My whole family's in Southern California on the ocean, and sometimes I miss the ocean. But whenever I go back, it's like the traffic, the hustle, the bustle. And then I'll fly into the closest city, which is Albuquerque. And I always go,
That's so funny, Lauren, because I often tell my friends I do the same thing. There's a particular bridge that I drive under from coming out of Melbourne town, and because we're like about an hour out of the city, it's, out of town. So as soon as I go under that bridge, I do a big exhale, because it's just energetically, there's a shift. You're just sort of out of the grid, and just there's just that reconnection to nature. Like it just feels, peace becomes me, I feel.
Sense of place. It's really powerful.
Yeah.
That place of memory that can kind of be in our bodies, in our soul. And, it makes me, it's sort of, if you rely on your memory, let's say to start a painting, let's say you're a representational painter, for instance, and you bring a photograph of a place that you love and you want to paint that. And as a mentor, I might say to them, okay, look at the photograph once, but now close your eyes with all your senses. It's very somatic. I want you to feel into that place. And then what is one particular thing or two things that you really see in your mind's eye? Now I want you to paint that from memory. And what can often happen when we do that is, one, we're relying on our own symbols and signs and intuition and guttural responses to what is important. Sometimes when we look at it's like changing perception, like a shift in perception. If we're looking at a whole picture and we're trying to take everything in, how do we know what's smell that we can remember that comes out into a shape, or a sound we might have heard that connects to a powerful flower in the corner on a vase? All those things are so subtle, but I think that is the practice of picking up those cues and subtleties in your own unique memory of how you remember something that brings out the authenticity of your own soul language as an artist.
I love that, because there is so much that we take in beyond our awareness, isn't there? It's all that subconscious content that you can then tap into, and there's a deeper language, there's more of that connective energy beyond the filters and the conscious self, would you say?
Yeah. And the subconscious is so powerful. It is where, once we are really developing relationship with it, and there's so many ways we can develop a relationship: through dreams, through journaling, through meditation, even just sometimes going outside and taking a walk and letting the trees talk to you, little clues of whatever's around you, because our minds, our intellect is just a filter. We're not creatively coming up with innovative ideas really with our mind. In our intellect, I don't think so. I think that's a storehouse of information. It's like learning a whole bunch of techniques. We can read and study somebody as an artist, but when it's all said and done, we might rely on our mind for how did those three colors get mixed? Let me go back and look. But if we're just in the flow of that subconscious, allowing for the storehouse of what, sometimes we store things in our belly, sometimes we store it in our hearts, but our minds are just cluttered with so much.
Yes, agreed.
Do you remember being a kid? Yeah. When we were kids,
like that too. Yeah.
Yeah. We would study and we're just taking in information, and then we're regurgitating it back. Now, what do you remember from that? What's really important, unless you have a photographic memory, some people do. But whatever's really important is a clue to your own personal inspiration of language or imaging.
And I guess when we're children, we are much more connected to the divine. We don't have our faculties aren't all online. Our mind is not. We are much more in that intuitive body, in that subconscious state. We are in a completely different. We're a lot more open to all that is. We haven't had all the programming and things and the layers that we tend to build up through our lives. That's not there. So as a child, the more I feel like connecting into that child-like self, is really what brings in more magic. I feel like actually lately I've been waking up excited, like I used to feel excited as a child, and my schooling years took that out of me, just because of not wanting to get up and all the forced things that were forced upon us. But really, as a child, I used to write lists of, I want to bake a cake, I want to draw, I want to collect autumn leaves and make a collage. And there was this joy, and I feel like that joy really is returning. And I feel that joy when I create, because there's this deep freedom, that I can access. It's that expansive, unrestrained kind of self can come through.
I think that's amazing because we want to grab that tail when it comes. I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and they were saying, something's not right. I just don't feel like creating, and blah, 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 blah. And they've been a painter, I don't know, about 6 years. And I go, well, congratulations. You had a good run. We're human beings, we're not meant to be here and stay here at all times and make work forever. And and if you are, then you're just a production line, or we're meant to be contemplative, to rest, to think about work. Then we can go in and make work. But I think our culture just, that Christian work ethic, go, 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 or not just Christian, a lot of just sort of very formulaic, restricted. We must be producing.
The patriarchal sort of hyper-masculine energies, isn't it really?
That's really what it is. The feminine is so much more receptive. It learns to listen. And, even with my own paintings, I went to graduate school, got my MFA in a very patriarchal system. It took a decade to just kind of unravel all that, because I was told, don't show it. This is back in the day in the 90s. Don't show emotion. It will make you look ditzy. Don't do anything too personal. This is changing now, thank goodness, because you don't want to disclose too much. Just keep it on the up and up. And now we live in a time where the more authentic we can be and the more real we can be, people want that to be, because we want connection. We want to know that we're not some ivory tower, of success, that we have our follies and we have shared experience of pain and joy and
people's
magic.
Feeling nature is coming back online so much more, so they're sensing that when something is authentic, that they're becoming much more sensory beings. They are dropping more into that feminine, so it's more about feeling. And I think authenticity is, it's definitely what the world needs and craves. And I think that's what everybody's becoming more of. I think as the layers and all of the things are peeling back. I mean, it is heavy energy at the same time, because we are all healing a lot of generational trauma. I think it's a huge passage but we're all so lucky to be alive at this time, because there is just this monumental shift from how things were, and we're moving into this beautiful new energies. And I'm really excited about it all.
Ascension, baby. We're ascending. There's something interesting in all that. I had recently wrote a grant, and for the spiritual and art. And one of the questions on the grant was, how is the spiritual and art related to social transformation? It was something like that. And I started writing about it, and I'm like, oh my God, I've been somebody for 3 decades who's been interested in spirituality, and that's why I make art. But I found the question really hard. And so the more I was randomly writing, the more I started talking about a feminine wound. This is an archetypal, so male or female, doesn't matter. But the feminine wound is, we've all felt it if we've ever been told, you're too sensitive. You're too emotional. Oh, what an imagination you have. Those spiritual phenomena of orbs or dimensional spaces couldn't possibly be real because you can't see it. So that's that patriarch, right? And it's a very linear way of being. And as that's dying off, I think we have to remember with AI rising, because whatever we have in life, if we're evolving and we're ascending, and the spiritual is becoming more 5D, 6D, away from 4D, which is time, and 3D, which is this concrete reality, that we have to remember AI does not have a soul.
Love that.
I know, right? AI can't replace us with our hearts.
It can't create.
Body.
It cannot create. It can only, mash up or like make a collage of things that have already been created. It cannot actually create because it doesn't have a direct source connection. And that's the one thing it will never have. So to me, we humans, like, I can feel when something's been created by AI, because there's no feeling. It's dead. It has no soul. So I think people really, miss that and think that it's some sort of threat. And I really think it's just a distraction and taking away from the spirit and the power in people.
Yeah, and I think it's a wake up call, and as we see, like some out there say AI has got the intelligence of Einstein and in 10 years will surpass anything, that one of the answers in that feminine wound is, until we have a consensus and an acknowledgement with everyone that the feminine aspect of feeling, intuition, heart, soul, what can't be seen doesn't mean it's not real, that we won't get the healing that we need. We need to really acknowledge the power of trusting our own intuition, so we can combat whatever is going to be surfacing.
I feel like it's coming around, and people are being forced to, if they, whether we like it or not, we are being forced to trust ourselves we cannot plan for the future in the way that we used to. The reality is shifting in a way where we cannot work in the old ways. It's just not it's just not supportive anymore, because it is so feminine, and the more we can work with the feminine energy and allow and trust and move in a more fluid way rather than these old structural masculine ways, the more easier life becomes. And I think it's just unfolding more and more.
I think one of the tools and ways to really begin to practice that is, we've kind of many of us have heard in certain spiritual circles, you want to create your own reality, do these affirmations, say them enough. This keeps us in the mind and it will become so. When I think what it is we just need a shift in perception. Like, here's my reality, and I might have a messy studio, and all of a sudden I'm judging my messy studio. But if I start practicing with the littlest thing of shifting my perception of how I observe it, that's the beginning of how we might then transform physical reality of whatever we're wanting to manifest in this life. Maybe. Absolutely. I don't know. It's just something I'm toying.
I agree. And that perception goes back to what we believe and how we choose to believe. The power of belief and the power of intention, I think, is everything, So what am I going to believe about myself? Oh, I'm going to be hard on myself. I'm messy. No. Wow, look at me. I've been busy, obviously. So look at all of my work around me. This is me pouring my heart out and creating and doing what brings me joy, So for you, Lauren, I'd love to ask you, what came first for you? Was it where did your creative journey start? Was it the spirituality that came through, or did the art, how did that all come through and be such a strong part of your life?
Yeah. Like you, my mom's a psychotherapist, but she was a painter. And my father was, because I know you have parents that were artists. And I used to paint galaxies and horses for the love of freedom, probably. And she would show her art at a local art chapter, and I would bring them down to when I was 7 years old, and I would put them up and I would sell them along with her local art chapter. I just knew at a young age. I never really went out to look for what I wanted. I mean, there was a short period of time I thought I wanted to be a therapist. And in many ways, as the decades have gone on, I'm not a formal art therapist, but I definitely, in my mentoring practice through intuition and the spiritual practices, there's a form of therapy in that for art. It's usually people get over limitations, because whatever shows up on the canvas shows up, whatever shows up in life and canvas, they're usually intertwined. And so I did go the route of getting my bachelor's degree, which was in conceptual photography at first. And then I taught my first creative expressive workshop at the age of 22 in the back of a New Age bookstore. And I pretty much have been doing that same thing, but it's just evolved over the decades. And then I got my MFA in painting from Portland. And that's when I really felt that I needed the MFA in order to teach. And I did teach in academia for quite a while, just foundational courses, painting and drawing and all that good stuff. But academia was not, it taught me how not to teach. And it did give me an art history background, which I find extremely important. I think for anyone out there that is moving into the arts, it's really important to know where you came from, the foundation, of where things came from. Like if I hear someone call themselves an abstract expressionist, as today, I expect them to know the history of how it was developed, during post-war and how that happened and why. And if we're like in fifth generation abstract expressionism, what does that mean in a contemporary language? So I really enjoyed that aspect of reading and learning about art trends and the surrealists and the abstract expressionists, and where are we now, meta modernism after postmodernism. I mean, I can do all those gymnastics, but mostly I was told not to discuss my spiritual beliefs in graduate school. It would make me look ditzy. I was really into orbs and spirits, and I was called woo woo, and that you would not be taken seriously. And what's interesting about all that, it was the 1990s. We were coming on off of the art canon of minimalism and intellectualism and critical theory. And we had a whole era of the romantics, poets like Ralph Waldo Emerson, the Transcendental movement, the Transcendentalists. And even in the 1970s, there was a wonderful show, the catalog's behind me, called The Spiritual in Art. So it wasn't that the spiritual in art never happened. It just got forgotten and buried for a time. And all of a sudden, I was told if I started talking about these invisible realms, that I would be considered a unicorn painter and woo-woo. And all we need to do is look at people like Hilma af Klint right now.
I was just going to say.
Yes. Or there's another one, Agnes Pelton. I really love her work. But I wasn't looking at any of them when I was in graduate school.
And are any of them even mentioned in the art history books? I mean, I have quite a few art history books, and a lot of the
there
women are missing. A lot of the women are missing.
No, they're not. And it's the Jennings book. They're I think a father and son. Do you remember those art history books? JENNINGS. Anyway, this is the spiritual and art, and Agnes Pelton and Hilma af Klint are mentioned in here. But this was the 1970s. This book came out. And Transcendence, the Visible, the Generation of the Abstract Pioneers. And Hilma's in there, and Georgia O'Keeffe is, and but yeah, I was more influenced, if anybody, by Rodin, by even Caravaggio, painters that worked with light, painters that had an element of mystery, the sublime. That can't really be explained. I was always kind of drawn to that, but I think I never really put it together that I was going to really take my metaphysical love of, I've been studying astrology since I was 15. I love human design. I've been doing that for about a decade. Anyone who doesn't know what human design is, it's a combination of the I Ching, the Kabbalah, quantum physics, and astrology. And philosophy. I love Rudolf Steiner and what he started the Waldorf schools, but he was a wonder, still, he's dead now, but a spiritualist that I study. And I learned all that really on my own. And I think for me, when I got out of graduate school, I was frustrated. I felt like I started believing what I was told, that I'd never be taken seriously. And I was even thinking of quitting. And at the time I was reading about the Oracle of Delphi. in Greece. And the Oracle of Delphi was a time where they had initiates, and Pythia was where the people came and they would go to the Oracle, which was usually a woman. And there's a place at Delphi in Greece where actually from the earth, there's steam that comes up. There's probably
like
hot
gases or
springs
something, isn't it?
Yeah. And they would foresee their future. And really what they were doing is they were strong intuitives and yeah, they probably could see the future. So anyway, I was reading a book about the Oracle of Delphi. And in this book, it talked about you can ask for a dream. You can ask for a dream to help you with your life. And we can all do this, if we really, but I was in a tough place. I'm like, I'm going to quit making art. I'm just going to quit. I don't know what I'm going to do. I was probably in my very early 30s. And I got down on my hands and knees and prayed. And I had a dream that night. I dreamed that I was with another colleague and we were having an art show. We were upstairs in this old warehouse, and her work was on the floor, was sculptural out of recycled trash and materials, very conceptual. And my work was this long wall of 7 orb portals, 36 by 36. And when I say orb portals, they were red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. And I had an elder man take my left elbow and an elder woman take my right elbow. And they were whispering, do you know what your work's about? And I'm like, no, tell me. And they said, your work is about raising frequency through color. I woke up this morning completely elated, and it put me right back on my track. So I guess I could say I'm inspired by dreams.
Amazing. Yeah, I definitely can see, there's so much etheric feelings in your work. They feel like portals almost, some of your paintings. Really, I don't have a formal training in art. My parents don't either. None of my family do. That was something I chose. I did not, my father was a master painter, and he has a lot of traditional techniques, endless traditional techniques about, how, and my grandfather used to work for famous paint companies in Germany. So he was actually a chemist and used to make the paints for various companies. So that sort of, I guess I learned a lot of techniques and amazing things through my father, but I don't have, and I've read a lot of books, but I don't have that formal training personally.
You don't need it anymore.
No,
you don't need it.
But I guess for me, I felt like I would have, I needed to do it for myself, I think, to really connect with, to learn and heal through the process of art and find myself through that rather than somebody showing me. It was part of my journey to do it that way. But when it comes to art, I feel like there is frequency imbued in paintings when people paint from their heart, and that frequency, that transmission of soul that is imbued in the work is unmistakable, and it affects people and heals them or activates them. It can activate the artist in someone. I've noticed that quite a number of my paintings I've sold to people, and then they become artists, or something activates within them. So it's like a magical, like books as well can activate you. They're almost like spells, How do you feel about that?
I think I've made thousands of paintings in my career, and I think there are a handful that just sing, like have that high frequency. And I don't feel like I did that alone. I can remember being in my Portland studio and I'm painting and I'm about to have a show, and the gallery owner comes to my space, and he says, that one. And I said, no, that one's not done. And he goes, are you sure? And we discussed it together, and I was telling him, you know, as I was painting this painting, I was thinking about a few things. I was just randomly, like coming through me. One was cardinals. It was a red painting, and I mean like the Catholic Church cardinals. And it was during the time that all the priests were getting exposed for sexual abuse out of the East Coast. And I was thinking about cancer. And I know nobody who has cancer, you know. I'm like, cancer, but I'm painting away, and I'm just letting all this kind of flow through me. So fast forward, he takes the painting. I think I tweaked it a little more, but not too much. And it shows up in the paper before the art opening happens. And that we used to have in Portland a preview party and then the art opening. And a woman saw it in the paper, like this big. She bought it immediately, and then she wrote me a poem, and she said, I have cancer, and this was painted for me. Basically, she went on to a beautiful poem, but she said it was made for me, and now it's hanging in my dining room. So you just never know.
Amazing gift that comes through people, I believe. You know, there's that co-creative energy where it's you, the unique essence that's you, working with all of the universe
That's
combined.
right.
You know, there's this whole expression, this holistic expression, and I think it happens even just being in the energy of people. But you know, it happens through our creation, because we are creation, and we are expressing ourselves as creation through whatever we
can
do.
Get out of our own way, you know?
Yes.
Stand aside, and that's the ego. And we need our egos, they're important. But then there's times, especially when we're wrestling a painting, we think it needs to go one way. But if we sit back, we can actually be in communication. The painting can tell us just as much as it wants, as I can tell it what it wants. And then, like any relationship, a third thing develops, and we have to compromise and find our way. And then, you know, even a higher element can come through. I mean, I think you have to be careful, because there's negative things flying in the air and there's positive. And I can have an entity come in and come through my painting that I don't want. Because sometimes when I'm really in my painting, my hand starts to shake with the brush in it. And I'm like, oh, there's a visitor painting with me.
What? Cool.
Yes. I don't plan it. It just starts to happen.
Wow.
I was like,
but don't you think, can you have the intention to not have anything negative come through? I mean, can you put boundaries and barriers? Because I think that's probably a good practice, especially if that can sporadically happen with you.
We can call it painting hygiene. Don't listen to negative news while you're painting. You know, don't watch violent TV while you're painting. Set an intention, light a candle, put some protection around you.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I often meditate before I paint, because I have a very noisy mind, so it takes a fair bit to shut that all down and turn it off, and to actually get into that flow and bypass the mind, because I want to create without restriction. You know, the mind is there constantly wanting to interject, so the more I can sort of shut that down and be in flow and act as a channel for creative energy, then it's just freeing, because the mind is so restrictive. And when you're creating from the heart, it's infinite. You can access anything, and it's I feel alive, my most alive often, you know, at those times when I'm in that state.
And we have spirit guides. I believe we have guides. Is your mom still with you?
Yes,
your
she is.
Still around?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they were artists. I was going to say, sometimes when other artists that we knew, or even if they're not alive. I mean, I once wrote a blog post, it was called Imaginary Friend, as if I had met and Mark Rothko, who I think was an amazing painter, a spiritualist painter. And I also do this practice. I teach it as a workshop now. It's called soul narration. And it's about connecting with each of our chakras, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, and going into it and asking for guidance or a guide coming through with the spiritual significance between a color, a guide, a painting.
Beautiful. It
Yeah,
sounds amazing.
it's something I play with and I believe in strongly, to just sort of know we're not alone. And I believe me, I've spent a big chunk and still do thinking I need to do it all on my own, that I am all alone. And then I have to say, what is that? That's fear. I know better. I practice, I meditate. I know who my guides are. I work with them, but it will seep in and life will get the better of you. If you're in any kind of survival mode or any kind of trauma, you can get re-triggered. That painting can be really healing elixir if we can just empty the mind. And then there are times that we ask for guidance with our guides.
Absolutely. And one can even call in or ask if there's a specific painter, like from the past, that would like to work with you, that would help bring out certain aspects of you, because they all had their own magic and their own expertise and strength, or relationship with their creation.
This is true.
Yeah. So are there any points in a painting where you feel like you're up against a wall or you're challenged, which I know happens with everyone, but how do you handle those points?
To date, painting is my longest intimate relationship. It's not about finding a plateau of commercial success at all. I feel that eventually the paintings will find their homes. But within that intimate relationship, I wrestle, I struggle. I mean, if I do have a deadline for a show, I mean, it can get really messy in here and just like pulling my hair out. And I dream about it and I stress about it. And one time I had a deadline for a show and I had my last two big paintings weren't happening. They weren't done. And I went upstairs and what I did, okay, this is going to sound a little corny, is I had a cat for 20 years who was like my soulmate. And when he died, he was around me more. My relationship grew after he died. And he's like, I want to help you with your work. I'm like, well, how are you going to help me with my work? I want to help you with your work. And then I just never forgot that I had heard that. So flash forward about 8 years. And I remembered him. He came into my head when I was like stressing about this painting that had to be done for a deadline for a show. And I said, okay, Mick, his name was Mick, Orange Tabby. Now's the time. So anyway, I went on to the business of painting, and when I get stressed, I don't know about you, I have go-tos. Like I have a certain repertoire I do this tape thing. I kind of go back to some of my old tricks. It's not a time to surrender. That's my stress point, because it could be a time to surrender. But I usually freeze and just go to what I know how to do. And I went back in and I'm like, no, I'm just going to free form. Let's have a lovely painting session. So what if this painting doesn't make it in? Well, lo and behold, I finish it. And then I go and I do whatever. And then 3 days go by and somebody comes into my studio and they're like, oh my God, I love your painting. You painted a cat in there. I'm like, what? I I go and I look, and sure enough, it's a silhouette of an orange cat in the corner of the painting. I almost want to see if I can find the card piece from it. Yeah. So
That's
these
great.
are yeah, I don't know what to say, but there he was.
I love that. I love that. So, do you often have a plan when you paint, or is it much more just?
I've always been an intuitive painter. I enter in by mucking about till something starts to present itself. I often do many layers. I often ruin paintings because I go too far with them, and that even energetically sanding them down isn't going to do it. But I just finished 7 paintings that size, and I have a 60 by 60s. And when I started, they became very angular, and I'm calling them arcs, angles, and angels, of looking at sacred geometry and how angles and intersections of lines can be like lay places, power spots, or inviting angelic realms. So once I made 1 or 2 of them, the only premise I had was I want to see where the geometrical shapes will still go.
Beautiful.
But not really a plan. Do you?
No, I often, it's been an unraveling for me with the plan. Like I come from a sort of structured graphic design, fashion sort of. I went on a corporate journey for many years, and then came back to the art. I was always, when I was younger, oh no, I can't be an artist. It's mum and dad. I could never do that. I didn't have the belief in myself to create. It was probably too confronting. I wasn't ready to meet myself, to that degree, because it is really meeting yourself. It's like looking in the mirror and talking to yourself. Like it doesn't get any more confronting to me, creating. But then the more I went through a big health crisis, and had to have emergency surgery, and then I was healing for quite a number of months, physically, emotionally, mentally, on all levels. And in that time, I couldn't do much more than art. And for me, I just got lost in creation. And I think, the more I let go and the more I can free myself from my mind and just allow, the more creation pours through me. The more aware I am of what I'm creating, the more, my mind wants to control it. But the best feeling is just sort of going for it and not actually being fully aware of what I'm creating. And then all of a sudden you have created something before you, and it's like, where did that come from? It's such a cool feeling. So, yeah, I think it's definitely not necessary to have a plan, and but it's also been one of my greatest challenges to become that, to allow, to trust, to love myself enough to hand over the reins to spirit and to my intuitive self, my feminine self, which feel like I had moved away from through parts of my life and shut off and been in abusive relationships and that sort of thing. So it's been a journey.
Yeah, I've had that journey, which makes us makes us compassionate human beings as we move forward, and also able to call on our guides and spirits and heart helpers when we need it.
Yeah, and having had wounds and turning them to, that's where all the magic lies, so if we're able to transmute and alchemize our pain and our wounds to gold, to gifts that can be shared with others who have those wounds when we've healed them, then we can help others heal their wounds, or to come into their feminine energy, or to raise their frequency. Because I know what it's like to be, down in the dumps and depressed and at rock bottom. I've been there, you know. People don't always see, you know, all of the trials and tribulations that you've been through to get to where you are. But that's what makes us, you know, that all those experiences, I wouldn't swap them with anyone in the world, you know, because that's really part of the magic, part of the journey.
The artist soul is to be sensitive, and artists are to be visionaries, you know, not to just be painting within the box of consensus of where society and humanity is. And I'm not saying we have to paint political paintings or what's going on in the signs of our time. I think the conversation that you and I are having right here is that ascension process that we're going through of expanding awareness, you know, and we might not be alone here on this earth plane, that there might be other dimensions going on simultaneously. I mean, science and quantum physics is starting to prove that we might not be living in one dimension and that's it, that there could be many going on, and there could be many of us, ourselves, maybe, I don't know if we're fragmented selves, or I could be sitting here in Santa Fe and there's another aspect of me in another quantum reality in New York City.
Well, if time doesn't exist, then everything's happening simultaneously. And if you believe in multiple lives, which I definitely do and have had memories of, then absolutely, you know.
Yeah.
But the idea of multiple realities at once from this point, that's a possibility as well.
Art can elevate us, you know. I think it's important to keep working with our hands, or keep making music, or keep doing a dance. We're all creative. It might not be that we're all artists, but we're all creative, and so we all have a way of expressing that.
Agreed. Yes. I mean, every thought is creative. Every single thought, every action is creative. So whether you're, you know, whatever anybody's doing, there is creation at work.
Yeah, and I remember reading and studying somewhere, I don't know which philosopher said this, but if we can imagine it, it means it exists somewhere. So that means all those sci-fi movies actually and books actually might exist somewhere in some dimensional field.
Yeah, absolutely. And we bring it to life through our imagination as well, and through our belief and just watching things, because I mean the mind can't subconsciously perceive it, whether it is real or not, you know, what we're taking in. So in a way it is real, and that's why I'm always so aware and careful of what I take in, because it, you know, what am I feeding my psyche?
But I think we also have to remember, creativity is born out of chaos. It doesn't come in a tidy package. And for anyone out there that feels, you know, I can make my paintings when I learn how to draw, or I can make paintings when I can afford art materials, or I think we work with what we have. You know, if it's just a pencil, then you just pencil and newspaper. You find a way to, you know, create that. It doesn't really serve us to wait for everything to get tidy.
No, and some of the most brilliant artists of all time have painted on cardboard and you know, used house paints on newspaper, and you know, collage, and you know, absolutely brilliant. So because they're not limiting their creation, they're just doing it, you know, they're not blocking themselves. So
but I think, you know, what inspires me like right now is, I mean, nature always, and I don't mean just, I can't, it's visceral. You know, it's just being in the nature. I'm with the elementals and I'm looking for the fairies and the spirits, and just that, those elemental signs. Like you were, before we hopped on the interview, you were telling me about seeing black swans. And I think that everything is a messenger, right? So if I saw 3 black swans, I'd go and I'd be looking up what the meaning of black swans are and how does that infiltrate what I'm working on in a painting. It doesn't mean I'm going to start painting back black swans, but every little subtle thing can be messages of just inspiration.
Agreed. We had a crow's nest. My partner moved in with me a couple of years ago, and there's been a big black crow's nest even through the time that I was meeting him. Every morning, if the crows were going crazy, I knew it was a day of transformation and big stuff going on. And in the last few weeks, or it might have been the last month, the crows have left, and we now have kookaburras, which are an Australian bird that they laugh. They have a laughing call. And this morning, the kookaburras were going off. And I said to my partner, wow, we've really moved through this big transformation. We're ready for the next chapter. The kookaburras are laughing, and they've nested exactly where the crows were in this huge gum tree in the garden. And it's, for me, animal messengers and nature, are so profound. Even what you were saying earlier about needing times for rest, and we can, in the old masculine ways, we can beat ourselves up. Oh, you should be doing this, and we find our value in the doing. But trees, take time to rest. They go through periods where they may lose their leaves, and they go inward for the winter. They go into the feminine, and they draw their energy in. So, nature is, for me, always the greatest teacher, and so much magic comes through because it is us. It's what we are. We're made from nature, and we go back to it.
Yeah, it's about being a contemplative contemplates their relationship with the tree in their front yard, or anything. I can remember when I had sold my house in Portland and I had a beautiful garden and I was all of a sudden in a place without one. It was my mother. She said to me, well, you can find beauty. That's that shift in perception I was talking about. We want a different reality and we think we're going to think it. But if you shift your perception for appreciation and gratitude for the flowers in that little pot that you have, that's enough. That's enough.
It's true.
So you don't need a big studio to paint in, or you can paint in a bedroom, you can paint in a bathroom.
Absolutely. It's all how you look at it and what you choose to, how you choose to see it is, it's part of your creative path, because your creation is, unlimited. So you can expand it to be whatever you want. You get to design your life, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Beautiful. Is there anything else that you'd like to share about your creative process, or what messages come through your work?
Well, I do see spirits in my works. The most powerful one will have a certain potent energy, and then there are a lot that just don't have that at all. I don't know. It takes a while to enter into the process. Sometimes I can remember I was fully in my process and I was scheduled to go down to Mexico, and my intuition said, don't go if you don't want to lose this thread of where you're at in this intimate relationship you have going with your 6 paintings. Sometimes I don't work on one at a time. I often get quite a few going at once so I can move around the room. I have ADD anyway, that it's a way to not overwork something and get OCD on one little thing. And which is also why I'm a mixed media artist, of working with collage and pastels at first, and then painting with the pastels, and then acrylic, and then oil last. But I lost my train of thought. That's what I do when I paint.
I'm the same. You remind me of me. And I have a similar process. I think I probably operate in quite a similar way, where I use many layers, and different techniques, and I start with acrylic and different binders and shellacs and things like that, and then I finish with the oils. There's a lot of different things that come in, like charcoals and pastels through the journey.
And for any painters out there or people that are embarking on a creative process and using paint, allow yourself to muck about, to really just not know what you're doing for a while, to see what might emerge, that then you can then slowly start to cultivate and nourish and bring to fruition. And a lot of risk taking. It's only a canvas or a piece of paper.
Yeah, it's so funny how we can get precious about what we're painting on, and I feel like I let loose the most in my sketchbooks.
I know. Somebody comes in with a really inexpensive piece of paper and they're like, I'm just making a practice painting, and it turns out really good, but it starts to fall apart. You don't know when you're going to make the real painting. It could be the sketch before the painting that is the one that has the most juice.
Yes. So you are teaching, you have online classes, or do you teach in person?
I do a dive deep program once a year where I take only 10 people from all over the world that want to really explore the depth of soul in making authentic work or body of work. And that's been like the crutch of like where my love has been lately. And then I teach classes and workshops, soul narration and paint big, where people come to my studio, and I have virtual classes. Like I have a whole color series that during the pandemic, we made little sets, me and my assistant, when we do red, and I go into the history of red, and we do a color meditation on red with the chakra. And then I go into it for intermediate and advanced painters, how to mix red, like on a big piece. And we did that all through. So I have a whole series on that, and a paint big tutorial, and not soul narration yet, but anything goes. I've got a plethora of things, and I also do private mentorships with people that want to work one-on-one with. Beautiful. I do 6 week, not week, but 6 session packages.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Oh, it sounds like, the way you express yourself, and you seem to have a wealth of different methods and ways to help bring out the creative in people. It's really cool to see, and something the world needs,
Yeah, I love it. It's part of I used to say when I would just paint, I would become very self-absorbed and debaucherized, paint all over me all the time. And then if I just teach too much, then I become resentful because I'm not painting. But I've found if I'm meant to do both. So when I am doing both, I'm in the most perfect harmony.
Beautiful. And it feels like you have a real call to help raise the frequency. What do you see or feel is next?
I just believe creativity is the gateway to higher consciousness, because it takes us out of that linear box. And we've just gone full circle about talking about the patriarch. And how to stay more in that feminine receptive of feelings. It starts with feelings. I bought some land out near Giorgio, Keith Country, in Ojo Caliente near Abiquiu, where Georgia had her studio. And I want to build an art studio that I can do workshops in and teach in and rent out. And I want to expand my offerings with the elevation of not being afraid to talk about spirit and guides and how to raise our vibration and to learn to trust our intuition and just paint. I because I'm an abstract painter, my goal is to nurture anybody's individual voice. And also to learn some discernment along the way. It's not just art therapy. It's also people who want to have an expression as a serious artist, perhaps, and to learn how to talk about the work, not while they're doing it or planning it out beforehand. I think that's for after the make work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. That sounds absolutely beautiful. Well, I'll leave all your links below. Thanks again so much, Lauren. It's been an absolute honor having you on. Thank you.
Lovely to talk to you. I want you to paint your black swans. They don't have to look like swans, but the feeling of them, because swans are auspicious.
They are. I'm going to get out in that studio. You've definitely inspired me today. Thank you so much, Lauren. Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this latest episode. If you can share, like, and follow, I would really appreciate the support. If you care to leave a review, I would be most grateful. I'll see you next time.